Hello, my name's Lottie and I'll be creating a series of video workshops like this to assist those taking part in the Loving Earth project. For those of you who don't know what it is, the Loving Earth project invites you to create a panel conveying your personal exploration of something, someone or somewhere, or a topic that's something being affected by our own environmental actions. You can find out more on their Facebook page here and on their website as well. So what we're going to look at today in this video is I'm just going to introduce you to different fabric types, so giving you some advice on material properties and where you might be able to find them just around the house at the moment. The first type we're going to look at are woven fabrics. So two quite common woven fabrics that would be ideal candidates to start off with probably for your panel base are cotton and calico. So they come in different thicknesses. These are quite thin examples of both of them, but they're both very sturdy, opaque, like they're not stretchy fabrics, so making them like an ideal base for your panel because they'll be easy to control and maintain, and they won't sort of stretch around and warp all over the place like some stretchy fabrics would. Linen as well would also be a good example of another woven fabric you can use. Again, it's not stretchy, so they would be stretchy if they had like an elasticated fibre like woven into them, but these don't, and normally, traditionally, they wouldn't either. So that's another example. And you've got a thicker type of linen as well that's quite similar to canvas, so if you wanted an even thicker and like sturdier, heavier back to your panel or base to your panel, then that would be like a good example to use from. Examples of like where you can find these around the house, so cotton will be in a lot of clothing that you might have, so if you've got any like cotton shirts like this one that you want to sort of get rid of or recycle into something else, a lot of like tea towels, bedding, curtains as well might be made out of cotton or linen. That's another example of like a tea towel that I had at home. So these colours and like prints that are on some of the fabrics you might not all have a plain fabric, and that's fine. You can incorporate these colours and these prints into your panel if you wanted to. And things like the buttonhole, you might want to include the buttonhole as like a functional or decorative part of your panel as well if you wanted to. Another type of fabric as well would be like woolen fabrics. So I've got a couple of examples here that I found from parts of like an old blanket, well, one from an old blanket and one from like an old pillowcase. So again, they're not stretchy really, because unless they have like an elasticated fibre inside them. The difference between these and like the cotton and the linen is these have like a softer, fuzzier feel. So if that's like the effect that you wanted to give to your panel, then these would be a good example to use. All of these, when you do cut the edges, you'll see do fray. So that's just something to bear in mind if you wanted to have cutout shapes as part of your image. If you did cut into some of these, I mean, except for this woolen fabric as an exception, they will all fray around the edges slightly. Another type that you can use that's in a lot of clothing at the moment, so you'll mostly find it in t-shirts, is jersey fabric. So this is from like an old summer dress. This is very stretchy and flimsy and like very, very lightweight, so this would be a bit difficult to use as a base fabric, I would say, for your panel. You could try, but I would say if you're to make your life easier, I'd go for something a bit stronger, and then you can use this maybe on top in other ways, or for like decorative parts that go on top. It's another layer, because as you can see, this is very like flimsy and kind of has a mind of its own. Another type of fabric as well, so knitted fabrics. So generally these will be stretchy, and you can find that this is like from about the bottom of like an old pair of trousers that I had that were too long, so I snipped off the bottom and kept like the remaining fabric that I didn't need for the trousers. This obviously has a stretch to it, but there's a lot of ways you can use this, like on top of your, like you can use it as the base, but you can also use it again like on top of your panel. This is like part of like an old sock, so I'm sure everyone's got some odd socks at home at the moment that they need to sort of make use of if they want to. So you've got like the stretchy knit part of it that you can use, but then you've also got the ankle area, like the edges. So take note of like when you're looking for fabric within garments, try not to throw any bits away that are recognisable as a garment, because they can be really interesting to use if you want to as well in your panel. You can also, if you can hand knit, you can hand knit bits that you can add as well on top of it. And this is like part of like an old scarf as well, that if you wanted to, you can take, because with knitting it is like one long looped piece of yarn or multiple pieces of yarn, you can unravel knitting and then use the yarn as well for your panel. Another type is like fleecy material, so this is from an old fleece, so it's got a very soft one, like fuzzy side one side, and then the other side is like the woven part of it, so the back of it. You can find these in a lot of sort of dressing gowns, baby clothes, baby toys. So if you have any old children's toys that you've got at home that you're not sure what to do with because you can't take them to the charity shop or whatnot, you can use the fabric for them, and even like the stuffing that's inside of some of them you can use as well. Another type is felt. So felt, you'll see, unlike most of the other ones that we've looked at the moment, when you cut it, the edge stays nice and clean cut. So you might have like a box of craft stuff at home where you've got little pieces of felt. This was like an offcut of felt that I found. So it's important to remember not to throw anything away, because you might have like a small detail that you want to add to that you could use this for. And it's also felt, it's quite strong, so you could use this as the base of your material if you wanted to. This is like an acrylic felt. Or you can use it in a three-dimensional way as well, so you can have it sort of raised above the surface if you wanted to of your panel, or being like strong functional parts of your panel as well. So we've also got denim. Oh, the felt as well, you could probably find that. So like I say, if you've got like a craft box of things, you might find some felt, but you might also find it like the fleece in old toys, or possibly like maybe a blanket or some pillows or anything that you don't want anymore. So maybe don't take things apart just for the sake of it, but if there's anything that at the moment you can't throw away, or maybe you don't want to throw away, you can turn it into something else. So another, probably the most recognisable that everyone's going to know, is denim. So you might have an old denim jacket, or any like jeans, or a bag, or like some kind of accessory that's made of denim that you want to recycle or upcycle into something else. So with denim, you've got, it probably mostly come in this colour, but you've got obviously different colours that denim can be dyed. But it's not just the material, so you can get interesting effects with like the frayed edges that denim leaves. There's the thicker areas of denim as well that may be harder to stitch into, but you can still use in your panel, so that you could use this as a base if you wanted to. And one thing with denim as well is I'd keep all of these bits, like the belt loops and the pockets and like the edges, the hems and the edges of parts of the garments, because you can add those onto your panel as well as like functional 3D bits that like pop out from the surface. So like nothing, the idea is like nothing goes wasted. Another type of material that won't necessarily fray, so this is a scuba type fabric. So I don't know, you might have an old wetsuit at home that doesn't fit, or you can't use it anymore, or you don't want it anymore. You could use that, and that won't fray at the edges, so you could have that as like your panel base, or you could have that as shapes like this that you applique on top, and then when you cut the edges, obviously it won't fray. Similar sort of materials you might find with that won't fray as much as well is from sort of old swimming costumes, like that lycra sort of material. Just bear in mind, like this is quite thick, so it does stretch, but it's because it's thicker, it's easier to handle. So like the jersey being really, really because it's quite thin and it's really stretchy, it kind of goes like all over the place. And the thinner sort of like fabric you've got will also be harder to control and go a bit all over the place. So just be careful when you're stitching into stretchy fabric that you're not overstretching it too much, because when you then stop embroidering onto it or stop stitching into it, it will ping back into itself and sometimes shrivel up. Another type you might have at home as well is like, well, flannel basically, so like terry cloth material. If you've got any old towels or old flannels, that like rough loopy surface might come in handy for like a certain part of your image that you're trying to recreate. And I think it's quite nice as well with the flannel and the denim that, or any of the clothing, that you can see, you can recognise that's what they're from, and it's quite nice that you can recognise that's what they're from. So another type of fabric as well that I've looked at, so I've got, you might have some leather at home as well, so I would advise probably not going out, well, not going to find any leather, like be mindful about going to buy more leather or new leather just to do this. But if you have anything at home that's like an old jacket or some old shoes that you might be able to get some of the fabric of, or old leather bags, or even like old straps or hats or gloves or parts of furniture as well that might be sort of coming to the end of the use, you can use those bits of leather as well if you wanted to as part of your panel. So you get like more flexible, like softer parts of leather, or softer types of leather like this one, and then you've also got like really stiff, so you won't be able to, unless you've got like a special needle that you can use for leather, it'll be difficult to stitch into this, or almost impossible at the moment to stitch into it if you don't have the right tools, but you can use it and glue it onto your pieces if you want to. And it's also with leather interesting to notice that you've got like this suede-y side on one side, and on the reverse side you've got like that shiny leather look as well. Another part is also, this is like another part of the flannel, so this is just the edge of the flannel. So taking bits apart and like separating them into segments can change how they look, but then you can still make use out of them. Chiffon is another material as well that I probably wouldn't recommend using as a base, because it's probably the lightest weight fabric that I'm going to show you today. It's very translucent, as you can see through it, so you could use it more as an overlay over the top, or if you wanted to create something with like the frayed edges that you can get when you cut the edges, you could create something like a nice texture that's just made with strips of fabric with chiffon. That works quite well. Organza as well is a similar fabric to chiffon, but it's got more sort of three-dimensional like spring to it. So with chiffon it will sort of just flop, but with organza, if you put it into a position that's three-dimensional and sort of upright, it can stay in that position, so it's very springy. And it's probably more see-through than the chiffon, but might work quite nicely if you wanted to overlay it as a layer onto your panel for maybe water or glass, if you wanted to create those effects. And another sheer fabric that you could use as well, if you've got any old tights at home, that if you've got too many tights or tights with holes in, rather than throwing them away, you can use the fabric so you can stretch it out and use it flat, or if you wanted to, you can use it in a 3D way where you're filling it and adding it as like a raised, like heavy thick surface where you're like trapping things inside the tights. Again, the tights are obviously stretchy, so I wouldn't recommend using those as a base material. So another one that I found as well at home is, so it's the underlay material that you'd put underneath a table and tablecloth, so it sort of protects the table. So it's got this like foamy gridded pattern texture on one side, and then it's got this fuzzy woolly texture on the other side. So it's nice to like maybe collect any bits that you can find of of different materials or like offcuts that you can find around the house that you think have interesting textures, because they might be nice to use in a part of your image that you might not really see if you're just looking for it. So I think just collect a range of fabrics at home, really, that might be quite useful. So PVC, or I didn't really have any like plastic tablecloth that I could use as an offcut to show you, but this is a PVC fabric, so it's fabric on one layer on one side and then it's a shiny plasticky surface on the other one. And velvet as well is different, you've got a different sort of texture on each side, so they're quite nice again to use as like a decorative layer on top. And then lastly, like other parts that you can use that I think is important to remember. So you like things on garments, if you're using like all this, it's important to think maybe how can I use all of this object and not just throw some of it away. So like buttons are great to keep. Any like trimmings like lace edges and stuff are great to keep as well. Labels, it might be useful to think about how you can use clothes labels as part of it as well, because all fabric can be used. And then also zips. So if you're looking at a garment if you're looking at taking apart a garment that has a zip as well, it might be useful to keep those and see how you can like maybe make that a functional part of your panel. So those are all the fabrics that I was going to show you today. Obviously all of them have different properties, and all of them you should be able to find at least one of those at home, if not more of them. And you might be able to find other examples that I haven't mentioned today as well. But I think it's a good start to this project where you're thinking about what you're trying to convey, and like the concept of Loving Earth the Loving Earth project is to record like a personal like exploration of something that's being affected by the environment. And I think it's good in the time that we're in now as well to think about what we can use at home rather than going out and finding more things. So upcycling what we can use at home, I think is very important. So my next video will be online very soon, but please don't hesitate to ask me any questions about any of these fabrics maybe that I haven't mentioned in this video. Okay, thank you.